Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of A Ross Games. Today we're doing something just a little bit different. We're going to be doing a Draw My Life video. And the reason I'm doing this video is because we have just hit 500 subscribers. And I want to say, first off, just thank you guys so much for getting me to 500 subscribers. I never thought I'd be here, and it feels like we're still growing even further. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. I'm very happy to be here. So for this Draw My Life, I'm going to be going over a lot of things that have gone on in my life. Obviously, I can't talk about everything, but I'll talk about big events that should highlight who I am today and how I turned out the way I am today. I want to start off by going over how my family was. My father was around when I was young. It was me, my mother, I have an older brother, and myself. And my father was around. He left when I was 3, so I have no early memories of my father. So it quickly turned into just my mother, my older brother, and me. Very young, I was a very, very hyper child. I was diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, so hyperness was just who I was. I was very hyper. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate for long periods of times. It was a lot of stress on my older brother and my mother. It was like this for years where I was in school and I couldn't focus. I couldn't make any friends because not a lot of people could find me tolerable. And understandably too. I was quite the hyper mess. So weirdly, due to my condition of having ADD and ADHD, I have to go on this weird diet which highlighted foods that would set me off. So unfortunately, we found out that blueberries and anything blue like that would activate the chemical in my brain, which caused severe hyperness. So I didn't really get as much blueberries and blue stuff as I would have liked as a kid, but that's okay. My mom was still actually very cool about it because she could handle the hyperness. The other part of my brain, which was accented by aggressiveness, was caused by chocolate. So very early, I couldn't have chocolate, which it sounds like it would suck. And it did. That's why it sounds like that. I love chocolate. Chocolate is amazing. I grew up being able to eat white chocolate. It was just the chemicals in dark chocolate that would set me off. So I couldn't have chocolate milk. I couldn't have chocolate candy bars. I couldn't have anything delicious, which was all right. But yeah, so basically, from a kid, I wasn't really allowed to have chocolate because it would set me off in an aggressive manner. So as I'm growing up, it's still just my mom, my brother, and me. We lived in a apartment in my hometown in Wisconsin. It was very small, and it was nothing my mother could control. But you have to understand, my mom was young when she had my brother first, and I came almost 2 years later. So she was just a kid raising kids. We lived in a small apartment, and my mom worked hard every single day. We didn't get to see her much growing up because she was either at work or she was sleeping because she was so tired. So me and my brother spent a lot of time together in this very small apartment building, and we did not get along at all. We did not. We broke things constantly, from brooms to mom's collectible plates, because we were just constantly getting in fights with each other. My brother was always bigger than me until we started getting just a little bit older, and I kind of outgrew him in size. And I think that's roughly right around the time we stopped fighting so much, because I don't think I was as easy of a target. My father had shown up a time or two during the course of these few years to visit and to see me. My father and I do not have a close relationship. We do not talk, and that will be the course of the rest of our relationship. Roughly around the age of 8, my sister was born, my little sister. Zach and I were at the point where we were old enough that Zach was watching me, and we would float between babysitters and that kind of deal. But my younger sister was born, and I immediately just loved her to death. I was so excited for her. Well, when mom told me she was pregnant, she wanted me to go pick out baby names, and we picked out a whole bunch of them, and we were just so excited for when Shay was coming. Unfortunately, some bad luck fell on my mom during that time. When she was pregnant with Shantae, she was at a concert in Milwaukee and she was shot. She and I believe a few other people were a victim of a shooting at a Milwaukee concert. I don't know if all of that's completely accurate. It's just memories of the stories that I heard from family of the whole situation going on. My mother and I don't really talk about it, nor have we really sat down and talked about it. But because of that, she was hospitalized, and it complicated, obviously, issues with Shantae being in there. So when Shantae was being delivered, there were a lot of complications where they could have lost Shay and they could have lost Mom. But thankfully, both of them came out just fine. My little sister was home. It was obnoxious and hilarious and just all sorts of things. And I really stepped up because at the time we didn't have a father figure around. So I quickly became a father figure to my sister. I raised her. Growing up with 3 kids in a small apartment became incredibly stressful at times, especially to my mother. We were all at odds. The only 2 in the house I think that were actually close-knit was me and my sister. My older brother was at arms with my mom. I was at arms with my mom. Shantae grew up being very close to Mom. But it was a mess. It really, really was just kind of a high-pressured, very hard to deal with living situation. And it wasn't just for one of us, it was for all of us. We all loved each other very much, but there were constant arguments and constant groundings and just us being kids and misbehaving and all that. Skip a few years later, a very important man in my life entered the picture. They never got married, but I looked at him as my dad, as my stepdad. His name was Brian. And he taught me a lot of really important things on what it was to be a man. He taught me how to be a kind-hearted person. He taught me how to love. He taught me literally the core fundamentals of who I am today was taught to me by this man. He was very important in my life, and I love him very, very much. During the course of growing up, my actual father had made a handful of appearances. One of the ones I remember is when we were younger, Dad came back for actually a good chunk of time. He came back, Mom and my dad got back together. We moved into a house out in Farmington. It was an old country house. And that place was big, and it was so awesome for us because it was like our first time really being out of a small, closed corridor apartment building. And it was so great. It sucked in the sense that it did not have heating. So during the winter, it was freezing because Wisconsin winters are cold enough as is. I remember the winters being miserably cold. A lot of us would all sleep downstairs in the living room, and we would be doing anything for heat, like turning the oven on and leaving the oven door open in the kitchen, trying to get some heat. I remember an old wood furnace we had that they used to light. It was miserably cold during the winters. But we, brought us together as a family and being close. During that time, I was just going into middle school, and my father he liked to drink. And because of that, mixed with the fact that, obviously I still had ADD and ADHD at the time, I was very hyper. And not only that, but I was kind of a nervous kid to begin with. When someone would tell me to do something, I would panic mentally. I was so worried that I would disappoint them, that I couldn't focus. And my father was very much one of those men that when he told you to do something, he expected you to get it done, and he doesn't want to waste another second with it. Because of these mixing and clashing of personalities, my father was very emotionally and physically abusive to me. It became a very drastic problem when I showed up to school, and during gym, the coach noticed while we were getting changed that I had bruises all over me. And he asked me where I got them from, and I'm not sure why I lied, but I just told him I got hurt. I was playing with my friends. Luckily, he was smart enough to know. So he called my mother, and I believe something along the lines of if I came to school with bruises again, they would pursue legal action. I don't know if my mother got that call or if my father got that call, but I'm going to guess my father got that call because when I got home that day, there was more lined up. Anyways, skip to shortly after him and mom got into it, he left us and we were stranded. We ended up moving back into those same apartment buildings with the help of the family. Now 3 kids crammed up back into a small apartment. And then the man I was speaking of earlier, Brian, that's where he stepped into the photo. He moved in with us and taught us everything we needed to know. He taught us how to be responsible. He taught us how to be good people. He taught us how to be more organized and how to take respect and responsibility for our home and to try to keep it clean and be good people. So fast forward a few years. This is where I met my first lifetime best friend, and that would be Brian. Brian is one of the weirdest, quirkiest, dorkiest people I've ever met in my life. But even still to this day, we are very good friends. We don't talk as much as we should, but that's due to a lot of choices I make, not choices he made. And I wish we did talk more. If you guys have seen in videos and in streams, you'll see him as Mia. He is transgender, and he has switched from Brian to Mia. So that's who Brian was, and that's who Mia is now. Still friends, still love him to death, and still a big part of my life. Enter Brian at the time, and we got into quite a lot of trouble as kids. One of the big stories I'll tell you is I had concocted this idea that later at night we would go to the school. It was during summer, and we would go in and shoot hoops at the gym. We grew up in a very tiny town where there was not really anything to do. So this was the grand idea. Fun fact, before this idea came, we were actually just walked into the school. It was open. They were just cleaning it up during the summer. So the doors were open. So we walked in, and literally the lights were all off. It was quiet and weird, but we were just having fun. So we went to the gym, and the lights were off. I'm like, dude, we could come back with a basketball and turn the lights on and just everyone have fun. We were just being kids. Anyways, cut to later at the night. We get a big old group of friends, and we're like, hey, let's go get in the school and shoot some hoops. So obviously when we get there at nighttime, the doors were locked. Everything's done. A lot of these kids that we invited, I didn't personally know or talk to. They were a lot of troubled kids in the neighborhood. So while we and Brian were walking around trying to find doors to get into the school, they were vandalizing. So anyways, I find a door finally. We get it open. We go inside. Didn't break anything, by the way. Very, very loose definition of breaking and entering. We forcefully opened a door without breaking it. And we ran in and we walked towards the gym and we thought something was off. We heard the janitor walking down the hall. So we all panicked. We're like, let's get out of here. We went out the front door. There is several squads of police officers outside holding guns, pointing at us and telling us to get to the ground. So we'll skip all the nitty-gritty details. My first police car ride, my first peeing my pants in the back of a police car ride, my first time pooping my pants in the back of a police car. Sadly, not the only time I've ever pooped my pants. Anyways, we'll continue. Terrifying situation. Spent the entire summer being grounded and going to court. Spent the next school year being hated by everybody. It was a fun time. But yeah, that was some trouble we got into. Before all this happened, but still roughly around the same time I met Brian, I also met another lifetime long friend, Cody. You guys see him in streams, Sixth Sense. One of my best friends for life. We have a lot in common. We have a lot of fun. We always have fun. And he's been a very influential part of my life, not just childhood, but growing into adulthood. We stay pretty close as much as we can. He's got his own thing going on. I've got my own life going on, but we still try to make time to at least game or chat it up and just have as much fun as possible. We've got some great stories that we've done too. A lot of childhood stories, and that might have to be saved for another video because I could literally talk for 3 hours about some of those old memories that we had. meeting him was definitely one of the most like pinnacly important parts of my life. It definitely it had one of the largest influences on who I am today. Anyway, so those are my childhood friends that are still around today. I have more, and if you guys are watching this, I'm sorry I didn't give you a shout out. That'll probably be for a part 2 of this maybe. But we still got a lot of ground to cover, so we're going to keep heading on. I grew up in a newer house after all of that had gone on with my mom, my stepdad Brian, my sister, and my brother. This is where things got really rocky between my mother and I when they had already been rocky. I was growing up, we very much saw differences in each other, and we didn't see eye to eye. Don't get me wrong, there's not an inch of my heart that does not love my mother, and there's not an inch of my mother's heart that does not love me, but that does not change the fact that we did not see eye to eye, and we fought quite a lot. Rolling around when I was 17, turning 18, I got very depressed, and things got way too hard at home, and I moved out my 18th birthday on the day of, and I went and lived with Brian. I got depressed and pretty much skipped the rest of the school year, and I failed by 1 credit in English and didn't get to graduate. Right around the time of my senior year, I met my, at this now point, ex-wife. We spent some time together. We had been dating for about a year at the time. We got into kid trouble. We ran off to Missouri. After I didn't graduate, I got depressed and didn't want to be in Wisconsin anymore. I ran to Missouri and to go spend some time with my dad and my dad's side of the family down there. Big mistake, obviously, just in life and in general. A lot of very terrible, awful things happened down there. What did happen as well is we ran off to Vegas and we got married. And then shortly after, she got pregnant with my son, Cody. Skip ahead a bit, we're back in Wisconsin. My son's being born. Still the best moment of my life. And the reason I told you about my past friends is because they meant so much to me in my life that my son is named after them. Brian's middle name is Thomas. My last name is Ross, and obviously Cody. So my son's name is Cody Thomas, and with my last name Ross. And that's how much these friends had shaped who I was as a person, and still to this day. So my son was based off all that. I know I'm breezing by a lot of stuff here, guys, but there's a lot of life in here to go over. It's a little more hard than I thought it'd be. But skip ahead. I started trying doing YouTube during the course of my marriage. It didn't work out. I had low self-esteem. I hit my max weight of 350 pounds. Life was a little rough for me. I became depressed due to the toxicness of a failing marriage and the parents of the person I was married to. It is nobody's fault. I want to state that. The problem is me and Alex rushed into something. It wasn't well planned out, and because of that, it led a very, very rocky next few years. It was constant animosity towards everyone. Everyone just, I think in the heart of hearts, knew the best route was for me and Alex to not be together anymore. But it took a few years for all of us to get to that point mentally. So skipping a lot of that awfulness and going right to the fact that we decided it would be best to get divorced. So we had officially gotten divorced. Alex was still living with me. I moved into a house in my old hometown. She stayed with us there for a little bit until she left and got her own place with my son. And that's when we decided that I would get him alternating weekends. It was very hard to not have my son around, but I knew it was what would be best for him growing up, is to not see how Alex and I were and think that that's what love is. I didn't want him growing up thinking that our toxicness is how he should base relationships in his head. So it was best for everything moving forward. I spent a few years in between this time, depressed, kind of lost. I started dating a girl. We were together for a while. We had a blast. Then we broke up, and at that point, I think life had finally just gotten too much for me. I wasn't processing anything. I wasn't dealing with anything. I was very angry, And because of that, I ended up in the hospital with my first panic attack. It was so intense, I thought I was having a heart attack. I started blacking out, I turned pale. I It literally is one of the worst memories I have of anything. I just remember going there on the hospital ride and then sitting in the actual hospital. I'm sorry, ambulance ride, and then sitting in the hospital and just feeling like this is it. This is where I go. I I started just feeling so terrible. They diagnosed me, told me I was having a panic attack, told me I would have to start dealing with that from now on. Then the next day, the girl I was dating at the time broke up with me and left, went back home. And I was having 6 to 7 panic attacks a day after this. And a lot of them could be up to an hour to 2 hours. And it literally just became awful. I was stuck in this tiny apartment that we were living in together with all the memories of us. And I was just constantly having panic attacks. And it was so awful, I couldn't stand being there. So I started just pulling all the OT I could at work. I was pulling doubles. I was working almost 70 hours in 2 weeks. Or not 2 weeks, I'm sorry, in 1 week. And then cutting back and doing 60 the next. But just trying to be at work as much as possible, trying to hide from my life. I got sick mentally from it, and I became very suicidal. And I wanted to kill myself, but I was scared to. I was scared to let everyone down. I was scared people would resent me and think I was selfish. It was an awful thought. I remembered it was this weird cross between wanting to be gone so no one had to deal with me or know me or look at me anymore, but also this thought that I wasn't good enough to deserve to finally get to rest. And mentally, I couldn't deal with it, so I stopped eating. I went the first month, I only ate about a handful of things. It was about a bag of chips here, like a small personal bag of chips, and a sandwich that my mom would bring me and make me eat because she noticed I was losing a lot of weight. Within that first year, after all that was going on and suffering, I lost the apartment. I was homeless for a little while. I moved in at my buddy Josiah's house, and I lived in a trailer out there because he was kind enough to take me in when I had nowhere else to go. And during the entire course of that entire year, I went from 350 pounds to 205, I think was my lowest. And I became sick. I became obsessed with not eating for 3 or 4 days. And then when I did eat, I would constantly exercise every single day for 3 to 4 hours. I was burning myself out. I was a mess. I was anxiety ridden. I was depressed. I was so lost. And then I met a friend of mine who I do not give enough credit to and do not talk to enough this day, but his name is Jay. And he kind of hyped me up and made me start believing in myself a little bit more. And because of that belief and that ability that he helped me turn my life around, I met Amber, who you guys know. And then Amber continued that course of getting me to believe in myself by giving me like the most fulfilling next 2 years of my life. She believed in me to do the YouTube thing when no one else did. Every time I wanted to give up or quit, Amber told me not to and to keep believing in myself and pushing. Every time I got depressed and down, Amber said that we can get through it. Every time I didn't want to eat, Amber would ride my ass and make sure I'm putting food in me because she doesn't want to see me get sick. And that's how we got where we are today. It's a crazy ride. There's so much stuff I missed. There's so much stuff I wish I could tell you guys. But that is fundamentally how I am the way I am today and who I am today. And I feel like every day I'm growing stronger, I'm growing smarter, I'm growing better. And it's not just because of these people that I've named, but it's also because of you guys. You guys have been supportive. You guys watch my streams. Every time I do music and put a video out there, you guys say the kindest things, and you guys have such a belief in me that I've adapted it and now actually believe in myself. Don't get me wrong, there are times where it can be incredibly overloading, frustrating, and I'm at my wit's end, and I've made some mistakes as a YouTuber, and I will continue to make mistakes, but it's those mistakes that I hope help me grow. You guys have been supportive. You guys have been kind. You have been amazing. You guys have helped me turn 5 subscribers in January is when I started, 5 subscribers into 500. And I cannot thank you guys enough. Again, I'm sorry that I couldn't go more into depth about some things and I couldn't explain better things, but there's so much to go over in so little time. It's really hard to get it all out. We might have to do a part 2 of this. Not a draw of my life, but we'll have to probably just do something where I just kind of fill you guys in on my life. But I thank you guys so much. You guys are amazing. I love you guys with every inch of my heart. Thank you for 500 subscribers. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.